Good day. That's how Australians always start every conversation, so I thought it would be appropriate. Thank you for coming. And if you're a student and participating in the theme semester survey of all of our events, which I think you should, because somebody is going to win a $1,000 study abroad grant. And the more events you enter, the more events you go to, the more surveys you take, your chances improve. So you can find the URL or the QR code inside the theme semester brochure. So today's event code is 2811. 2811. You can take that survey at the end of the presentation. So Australia is in the U.S. news today because the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is visiting the White House today. And in fact, tonight, President Trump is throwing Scott Morrison a state dinner. Only the second time that Trump has ever thrown a state dinner. In April 2018, he threw a state dinner for the French president. So, kind of a historic occasion to have Scott Morrison, who goes by ScoMo. That's how he's known in Australia, ScoMo, Scott Morrison. So what's on the menu tonight, you might be wondering? Sunchokes, which are kind of artichokes, summer squash, Denver soulfish, and apple pie. So nothing from Australia, but anyway, that's interesting. Scott Morrison is spending a week in the United States. He's going to visit NASA. He's going to travel to Chicago to meet with entrepreneurs. On Sunday, he travels to Wapakoneta, Ohio to tour a new Australian-owned manufacturing facility with President Trump. And then he goes on to New York for a meeting with the UN General Assembly, where he will deliver an address that will cover the protection of the oceans and preventing terrorist use of the internet. So quite a week for Scott Morrison. So, our speaker, J.J. Wolf, is originally from Melbourne. He's lived in LA for several years. He was involved in the retail clothing industry, which he didn't find very satisfying, although I suspect he made lots of money. But 2 years ago, he decided to make a career change, to leave the world of retail and start his own business, Aussie Pies and Sausages. And so I invited him to come over the summer, and he turned it into, I think, the great American road trip. This is really unbelievable what he's done. He left LA on Sunday, drove to Salt Lake City, where he put together a little gathering, went on to Denver, did the same thing. So that was Tuesday. Wednesday, he went to Wichita. Thursday and Friday, he's in Joplin, and if you want to see him tonight, he's going to be at Starbucks at 6 o'clock at 3324 South Rangeline. And then tomorrow he goes to St. Louis, and then on to Chicago, where maybe you'll meet ScoMo, and then on to Minneapolis, and then back to LA. So I like that. You've got Salt Lake City, Denver, Wichita, St. Louis, Chicago, Minneapolis, and Joplin. And he spent the most time in Joplin of all of those places. So you're going to get to sample his meat pies and sausage rolls at the end of the presentation. And since there are fewer people, maybe everybody will get to sample both, right? So let's bring up J.J. Wolf from Australia.
Thank you. Thank you very much. G'day everyone. First of all, we should probably get straightened out from the get-go that I don't think anybody cares about Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison visiting with Trump. I think we care more about what we're going to eat. So, yeah. We'll talk about pies and stuff. Let's skip the politics. We're starting off the flavour of Australia. First of all, that's spelt wrong. Flavour is O-U-R. Americans changed it, so I'm just keeping it in American for today. so that you guys understand what we're talking about. I was introduced that we're going to have pies and sausage rolls today. And that's what I do. I came to America 20 plus years ago, and I was in the clothing business. I was manufacturing junior clothing and selling to the chain stores like Forever 21 and Charlotte Russe, Hot Topic and those kind of places. And I was always baking as a hobby. The truth is that 20 years ago, there was this guy which won a pie competition in Australia, and I flew him over. He lived with me for a couple of months, and we were baking together, and it started ever since. And ever since then, every time I made a batch of pies, so instead of making 1 or 2, I'd make 200 or 300, and all the mates of family would come over and stock up. So I've always been meaning to do it, and then finally, with all the malls going shit, and the stores filing Chapter 11 closing down, I was like, man, I can't do this anymore. So $1.99 later, I had a website, and I started doing AussiePiesAndSausages.com to bring back a bit of a taste of Australia to America, because we find everything here. What don't you have? You've got Chinese, Mexican, Japanese food. You've got everything in the world, but we never really see Australian food. So if we have to start with the most important part to me of Australia, that's it. The handheld meat pie. All right, you know, in Australia, we have a 7-course meal quite often. It's a meat pie and a 6-pack. That's our 7-course meal. You know, every pub, coffee shop, footy event, wherever you go, you're going to have these meat pies. We started a long time ago. This was our Forrest Gump. This bloke over here, 130 years ago, or whenever trains first started, he used to go to the train station, bring his meat pies, the train would leave, and this guy would run 18 miles, meet them at the other end, and sell some more pies. So he was the first travelling pie man. So what I do today is not really original. Okay, I might have a van and stuff, but this flying pie man started it first. And then, run, Forrest, run. In Adelaide and in Sydney, they would have these little pie trucks, food trucks, what we have now popular. It was around back then. Often they were pulled by a horse and buggy, and people would go already back then for their meat pies and sausage rolls. In Adelaide, they would do a pie floater. Let's see if I've got a picture of that one. No. They would do a floater, which is they'd make a pea soup, and in the bowl of pea soup, they'd chuck a pie, turn it upside down, and put some gravy on top, and that's how they eat their pies over there. They're weirdos. But we take them in our hand and destroy them. It became very, very associated with our sport, which is football. You won't get to a football game without somebody wanting a hot pie. Everywhere you go, you smell it. You grow up with that smell. It's a winter sport. So when you're sitting down in the freezing cold, you know, freezing your knackers off, and all you want is a hot pie and a beer, and that's what everybody in the stadium is having. This is the brand that really took it into a massive way. It's called 4 and 20. So that became the fast food of Australia. 4 and 20, they were crapping out 11,000 pies a day or an hour back in 1970. Today they're doing something like 50,000 pies an hour. So it really goes everywhere. There's more gourmet versions at every bakery. And it's very, very tied into our sporting culture, to becoming that magazine, fancy food that it is today, which you're going to have. Pasties. Similar to meat pies, pasties they were started by the coal miners. So the wives used to put leftovers inside pastry, and they'd make this thick crust that goes around it, because their hands were always dirty. So they were able to hold it, and if they wanted to, they could even snap the edges of the crust afterwards, and that's how they had their lunch. It's a bit of a tough pastry, so you could drop it down a mine shaft, pick it up, still good to eat, no worries. And usually, you'll have a meat pie, a sausage roll, and a pasty. And it started in England, but perfected in Australia. Sausage rolls. Sausage rolls is also something else that we're going to be trying here today. It's a puff pastry rather than the harder pastry of a pasty. And it's got our sausage mixture that is very different to anything you guys have over here. So that's the other thing that I'm really looking forward to you guys sampling here today. You know, there's a story of in Australia, there's a mining town called Sovereign Hill, where I come from. And they say a story that there was a farmer over there. He went to the mayor, and he said to the mayor, my son's working in the mines. I want to see if he can marry your daughter. The mayor looked at him and said, what the fuck? Why do you think you should marry my daughter? Because he's the general manager of the mine. Oh, all right, yeah, sure. Tells his daughter, I'm marrying this bloke's son. Then he goes to the mine. He says, I need to speak to the guy in charge. And he goes there, and I picture him sitting. You ever watch that show, The Ranch? What's that bloke's name with the moustache? Talks like this. Yeah. I imagine some old bloke like that sitting there, and he says to him, I want my son to be general manager here of the mine. What the fuck? Why should your son be general manager? Oh, because he's the mayor's son-in-law. You know, Australians put things together, but it's an old, it's cultural thing. The mining, the pasties, the pies, everything wrapped in pastry, so it's easy to grab and move around with. The other thing that we have a lot of is the sausages. Now, weirdly enough, Australians associate sausages with shops like Home Depot. It's called Bunnings Warehouse in Australia. Bunnings Warehouse started doing sausage sizzles, where all you'd get is the sausage inside a piece of white bread with some caramelised onions and ketchup on top. It was a way that they were able to raise money for different kind of fundraisers. So they'd sell it for really, really cheap or give it away, or other people would want to do it with them. Now, more people go to Bunnings Warehouse for their sausage, we call it a snag, instead of even a drill or a hammer or something like that. So in fact, this trip, what Chad said, I went to Utah and Denver and all these places. Every place I go, I actually make the sausages, set up a grill, and we do a sausage sizzle. We don't serve anything else except for that. And that's how we eat our sausages. The burger. Pineapples on a burger. Fried egg on a burger. Fried onions on a burger. Beetroot. That's how you eat a burger. If you haven't tried that, put that on your bucket list. That's, you have pineapples on pizza here as well. That's something that we do in Australia. But pineapple on the grill and then onto the burger, try that. You'll thank me later. That's really good stuff. Fish and chips. Fish and chips was always traditionally wrapped in newspaper. I don't know if it was because it absorbed the oils or whatever it is, but the smell of newspaper and crisp fish and chips is something that you'll find it pretty much anywhere you go in Australia. And one of the complaints that Australians have when they come here is they can't find that old smell of fish and chips and that batter that you see over there. But that's something that is also a very common food that you're going to find everywhere. We touched on this yesterday, anybody that was here, but Vegemite is a spread. It's slightly salty. It was actually used in World War II. The government used to supply the Australian soldiers that went off because they reckon it's full of vitality. I can use it instead of Viagra. It's full of vitality and vitamin Bs, and it's really healthy for you. But it's marketed, it's become so Australian now that every Australian would never be without it wherever they are. You travel somewhere, you've got Vegemite with you. It lasts forever. It's like honey. It's probably the only two foods that will never go off. It tastes terrible to anybody who's not Australian. It's salty, but how Australian you are, you can tell by how much you spread on there. Very dark, you're a true blue. A little bit light, you're probably an immigrant. So, when the Australian Prime Minister was running, the way he described himself, I'm as Australian as Vegemite on toast. So that's really how incorporated into an Australian lifestyle it is. Let's get on to the yummy stuff. Lamingtons. You go to a coffee shop, you have a cup of coffee, you want something sweet to eat with it. The cake that we have is a Lamington. It's a sponge with a chocolate and coconut sprinkled on the outside, and usually you put jam through the middle or custard, and that you'll find also in every bakery, coffee shop. Ooh, yum. What's that? Pavlova. You start with a meringue base, fresh whipped cream on top, and then sprinkle any of the berries, strawberries, blueberries, and anything else on top. Now, there's a big rivalry between New Zealand and Australia. Who started this? We're going to say it's Australian, okay? In general, there's a big rivalry between Australians and people from New Zealand. Sort of like they're our Canadians, you know, they're just a bit out there. They're not really true blue, you know. There's Australian guy and we call them Kiwis. They love to egg each other on, and builders working together. And the Australian guy, he looks at the Kiwi and he says, "Mate, if I slept with your wife, would we be related if you had a kid?" And the Kiwi looks at him and says, "No, but we'd be even." This is how the Kiwis and the Australians banter to each other. It's very common. Pavlova, Australian, it's the best, freshest dessert you'll ever eat. Every kid that could get to school with fairy bread, they were the most popular kid in town. Every kid was jealous. My mum was a health freak. I had to have whole wheat bread and vegetables and stuff. But it was very common for a kid to get bread, butter, and we call them hundreds of thousands. In America, it's sprinkles. And that is one of the most favourite kid sandwiches that you'll find in Australia. Forget kids. It's still our favourite. In America, that's called Napoleon. We call it vanilla slice. Also, a staple at every coffee shop, bakery, It's the dessert that you really want to. It's rich. You want to get stuck into that every day. Let me tell you. It was too fast. Puff pastry with sugar and a thick layer of custard and puff pastry on the bottom. Ooh. We would take cereals and make them like cupcakes. So these were called honey joys. And we would also do with rice bubbles mixed with chocolate, cocoa, and turn them into chocolate crackles. And at every children's birthday party, these were some of the foods that they would eat. Let's get on to breakfast of champions here. Now, a lot of people think that you go to Australia and they're drinking Foster's, Australian for beer. Not true. Foster's is the best advertised beer in America, but actually every state in Australia has a beer that they turn to. I'm from Victoria, we would have a VB. In New South Wales, Sydney, they would have Tooheys, Brisbane, Gold. Beer started also originally back from the convicts' days, and they were brewing a lot out of wheat in those days because that's what they had. So the Australian palate for beer ended up dry and bitter is the choice of beer in Australia. A lot of lagers over there. And I would say when I grew up, every single block that you would walk through in Australia would have a church, a pub, a milk bar, which was the convenience store that sold everything, and then you get to the next corner, so there must be another pub. And at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, everybody finishes work, and it's packed, jam-packed. Everybody goes there after work, and it's part of their day, and they're all drinking beer and having a bite to eat, catching up. But those were the beers that you would find pretty much everywhere. There's a in Australia, over here you go to Starbucks for your drive-thrus, you can go to Carl's Jr. for a drive-thru, Chick-fil-A, you've got all these drive-thrus over there. In Australia also you have bottle shops that are drive-thru. And you just go in, they load you up your six-packs. So everybody's always very excessive, it's very accessible to get your beer. You know, we got another story. He's never going to let me back here, you know that, right? Just regretting it right now. Yeah, it's about the Vegemite. These three guys are sitting there having their lunch. There's an Englishman, an American, an Australian. So the American is sitting down, pulls open his lunchbox, and he takes out his peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Oh my God. If my wife makes me one more of these, I am going to jump off a cliff and kill myself. Englishman opens up his lunchbox. It's got roast beef. And he says, if my wife makes me one more roast beef sandwich, I'm also jumping off that cliff. Australian opens up and he sees he's got a Vegemite sandwich. If I eat one more of these, I am going to jump off the cliff. The next day they go back to work, they're on their construction site. Open up their lunch, bloody hell. The American's got a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That's it, jumps off the cliff, dead. The Englishman opens up, oh, my bloody wife. He's got a roast beef sandwich, jumps it off, dead. The Australian opens up. He gets his veggie sandwich, jumps off the cliff, dead. Now the three widows, they're at the cemetery. Oh, the American woman's crying her eyes out. If I only had given my old man a few other sandwiches, given a bit of variety, he'd be here today. And the English woman, oh my God, I could have done so much. But no, I only gave him roast beef sandwiches. And then the Australian woman, oh my God, she is crying her eyes out. And she says, he made his own lunch every day. We love our Vegemite sandwiches and we love our beer. You know, that's the other one. You know, the beer, Australians are tradespeople by nature. That's why, you know, it's construction, truckies. It's just an easy food to handle, a beer and a pie. So that's why we talk about it so much. You know, there's a story of a few blokes in Wagga Wagga, it's a town in New South Wales, and one guy falls off the scaffolding and he dies, and they don't know what they're going to do. They go tell he says, oh, somebody should go tell the wife. Anyway, he comes back and he's got a six-pack of that Tooheys beer, because this is in New South Wales. And his mate says to him, how'd you get, you told his wife, husband died, you got beer? Yeah. How did that happen? He said, she answered the door. I said, you must be Shane's wife, right? She said, yeah. He goes, you Shane's widow? No. I'll bet you a six-pack of beer you are. And that's how he came back with a beer. Anyway, today we're going to sample up the meat pies. I want you to have a bit of a taste of the flavours of Australia. There's a lot of other foods that we have over there, but these are the staples. So I think they're hot by now. Yeah? All right. So let's grab these out. And I want to show you the way you eat them. You get two choices. You can either put the sauce, which is what we call ketchup, on top or under the lid. Big choice. So come on over and let's try these little babies out. You first. Oh, she's busy texting. Yeah, I've got her eyes on you. All right. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah, I love this shirt, by the way. In case anybody's wondering, Missouri Southern. Very, very proud over here. Yeah.